Arvind sir. Sir, invitation display பண்ணலாமே. Start பண்ற வரைக்கும்.
Kanagraj sir.
Yes, sir.
How do I share the presentation?
Arvind sir.
Yes, sir. Sir, please check, sir. There will be a share option here near the mic.
Okay.
If you just click that, means it will show the window, sir.
So, you are in mobile phone or laptop, sir?
No, I'm in the laptop.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Two participants raise hands. Okay. So, are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I'm in a webinar right now. Can I call you back in 1 hour? Yeah, sure.
Arvind sir, can you start?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Hari sir, come to the presentation mode.
Presentation mode is what you are calling as a screen share, right?
Yeah, screen is shared. Okay.
Hmm?
But it will come full slide. It will come.
Oh, okay, I understand. This is fine. Is that fine?
No, sir. No.
I've gone through the slide presentation only.
Sir, kindly change the slide, sir. Then you can check. Sir, it is changing.
This is fine.
No, sir. I think your Windows.
I have given the presentation slideshows only.
Slideshows, sir. You are selected in PPT, not in presentation mode. I think again, come back to the.
Okay. What is the presentation mode?
Sir, you can
Hello.
No. Hello. Go back, sir.
You're going back.
Yeah, now we have seen the slides. No issue, sir. Okay, we'll start.
So very warm good morning to one and all present here, and I will. So very warm good morning to one and all present here, and I welcome you all for this webinar on how to plan for startup and legal ethical steps organized by Institution Innovation Council and Department of Bioscience Biotechnology. Now I like to welcome Dr. C. Kanagaraj sir, IAC convener and head of the biotechnology, to welcome the gathering and introduce today's research person. Sir, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. On behalf of Rathinam College of Arts and Science and Institution Innovation Council and Department of Biotechnology, warm welcome to our today resource person, Mr. Hariram. Hariram is a MBA graduate in finance, finance and marketing, and an associate member of Institute of Company Secretary of India. He is the managing partner of RCAS LLP. He is focused on providing the business compliance solutions. He was heading the corporate secretarial function for MNC company before starting the business for 5 years back. So in these occasions, I'd like to welcome our resource person, Mr. Hariram, to take over the sessions.
Thank you very much. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk on a very important topic. Thank you, Mr. Dr. Kanagaraj. And hello to my fellow students. Is it going to be like a monologue? I can't even see your faces. Neither can you all. Is it going to be a monologue? I guess the students cannot speak, is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The students, they can speak, sir. They can able to speak.
Okay. No. The normal protocol of any seminar is we tend to sleep. And now I don't even know the faces of the students, and neither can they speak. So I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a very lazy Saturday morning for most of them. And I don't want them to sleep for this session.
Sure.
Anyways, we'll make it as interesting as possible and make it less boring. I don't believe in having any kind of a session where I don't see any interaction, right? So we will have a particular time allotted where we can raise queries, we can talk to each other, understand more about this particular topic. Very, very important one, because the startup ecosystem is one of the major impetus for the growth of any country. India is not being any exception to that. Startups, with the innovation and the technologies, they bring in new business models. They try to change people's life, and hence it is a very, very important thing for any government to take care of. So that is why there is a plethora of benefits that the government is trying to place on the startup companies. Even after all this, why are we here discussing about this topic is something that is very interesting to know. There are a lot of failures that happens in any industry that you talk, any industry that you do. But in startup, the failures are very high. It's very exciting to know the reasons behind why startup companies fail in India and elsewhere. So we will try to restrict ourselves to the country that we are resident in, right? So we will start with a basic definition. I think most of you, if you have gone through, or if you are excited about being an entrepreneur yourself, you would have gone through the startup ecosystem as such. I would try to again remind you a little bit about certain basic definitions that you should keep in mind when we are startup, right? So any company, whether it's a private limited company, partnership company, limited liability companies, within existing of 10 years time from the date of its registration or the formation, they are classified as startups. And entities which are having less than 100 crores, again, within this period of 10 years, they will again be called as startups. And entities who are working towards innovation development or improving any kind of a process, so they will be classified as startup, right? So here it's very interesting to know the definition, because when you're looking to be an entrepreneur, the first thing that comes to your mind is to be uh, on alone, being a sole proprietorship. So this particular aspect of sole proprietorship is exempted from the definition of startup, right? So when we say that it is exempted from being from this definition of startup, it means that the government is looking towards more of an organized sectors to give them the benefits, right? So the unorganized sector like a sole proprietorship is exempted, even though you can start a business like that, but you will not be able to get the benefits about the startup companies. The ecosystem is big, right? So when we think about a startup, it is just not about the business alone. We need to look at the external and the internal environment also. The external environment will be more like the best environment is the political, social, economical, and technological environment, right? So here we talk about more about the culture of the organization, the regulatory environment in the sector that the company is trying to operate, right? So we talk about the availability of capital, which is very, very important for the ecosystem to survive. Now, this is a very interesting slide that I thought that I will share it with you all. Why do startup companies fail? If you look at the number of failures, as I told you when we started this seminar, that most of the startups fail. That I will give you a staggering number when we go to the next slides. But the reasons on the percentages of why a startup company fails in India is given in the slides for you to see. No need for a product, 42%, which means that today when we over innovate, right? The companies or the entrepreneurs or the innovators, when they plan about starting a company, the most important thing about the market feasibility or the market need is not uh, taken into consideration when they plan their startup. So sometimes we end up doing a product which is not market fit, or sometimes it could be a futuristic product, but currently the market is not there for the product. So this is one major percentage. Almost 50% of the companies fail because there is not a requirement for that product to be there in the market. There is no market acceptance. So when we plan a startup, when we think about starting a company, there has to be a feasibility of that, which is a profit feasibility and also the market feasibility, right? So we should take into consideration why such companies fail is because of over innovation is 42%. Run out of money, right? 29% of the companies fail because they run out of money. Today the ecosystem is so demanding that companies come and they are reliant on external capital for funding their business, right? So if you look at the examples of our own market, players like Zomato, Swiggy, all these people are bleeding a lot of money. They are making a lot of losses. They are survival because of the amount of investments that has been brought into the company, right? So not everybody are alike. So most of the companies, they struggle to raise capital. They struggle to move forward because today the startups are more concentrating on towards creating an ecosystem which is cost effective. That we even though as consumers it would be very helpful for us to get a competitive pricing. But this one factor is a very important factor about the startup companies, because each of them try to compete with each other in terms of costing and pricing, which is again the another percentage, which you will see that 18% is the pricing problems. So we try to compete with each other and end up giving up a product at a cost which is not sustainable for a very long time. So running out of money and inability to raise further capital is 29 percentage, and 18 percentage of the companies fail because of lack of funding or proper pricing policies. Ineffective marketing, again, today the entities are able to succeed because they are able to penetrate into the consumers' minds by effective marketing technologies. Today companies fail because of ineffective marketing, and marketing requires a lot of funding, right? So again, you will see that there is a direct link between the marketing, pricing problems, running out of money. Everything is relatable to the ability of a company to raise capital and scale the product or the business. Legal issues is a separate thing, but it's a staggering number of 8% of companies that fail because of legal issues in India. Legal issues will cover uh, your compliances issues, which are required under various various laws, in which the company you are forming a company or a limited liability company or a partnership companies. There are certain regulations which are applicable to everybody on a uniform platform, and there are certain regulations which are applicable to sector product or business that the startup company is trying to do. So 8% is a very big number in terms of the failures of startup companies. I told you that we will get into this topic of why we are talking about this percentage of startups who shut down. This is a number, right? 90% of the startups in India collapse in the initial 5 years. And now it is important, right, to discuss about why we have failed. I think previous slides we discussed about the various percentages which are there. But this is as per 2021 data, very recent one. So it is directly relatable to us. So as I told you, the reason behind the startup companies fail is funding, insufficient skill, lack of marketing, compliances, right? So all this are a very important points to be kept in mind when somebody is trying to create a system in place, a company in place, because the entrepreneurs, most of the times what happens is they are very great in terms of innovation and product, right? So they have a very unique product. We end up having a very unique product with us, but we don't find a market to sell. We don't have the fund to do an effective marketing. We don't have any uh, a skilled labor to execute certain aspects of the business, right? And most important thing is when you are doing a business in India, the compliances are too huge or too many to do. So there are companies who fail because of lack of knowledge in compliances and ethical behaviors. We'll get into that. Before getting into the formal presentation of the legal challenges and the ethical challenges, I would like to just to pass here and uh, ask the students if there are any queries.
Students, if you have any questions, please ask.
We'll try to make it as interactive as possible. So
Yes, sir. This is a chance to interact with the auditor. So
you
whatever
can
the
ask me any question, right? So let us stick to the topic, though. That's the only restriction for you guys.
So what is the difference between private limited company and LLP form?
Okay, those points are actually covered in the later parts of the slides also. But since the question is raised, I would like to explain it to you. So you're talking about private limited companies and the LLP, isn't it? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is Dr. Kanagaraj. Am I right?
Yeah, correct, sir.
Okay. Dr. Kanagraj, it's a very important aspect to structure the company or your business accordingly. So there are varieties of structures that are available for any companies to take. Companies in the sense I'm talking about the businesses to take. So one is you rightly said about the LLPs and the private limited companies. These two form majority of organized sector in India, right? So when we are talking about limited liability partnership, it's an upgraded version of a traditional partnership company, right? So traditional partnership company did not offer a limited liability, which is a very important concept under the law for the companies or the businesses, where the liability of the companies are limited to a certain portion, whether it is on the capital that you are invested or whether it is on the contribution. In LLPs, we call it contribution or investments by the partners. So this is a very important aspect because for any businessman, when there is a liability, it cannot be unlimited. Unlimited liability in the sense, what happens is in case of any fallouts in the company, the promoter or the business owner's personal assets are also attached for making good of any fallouts that are there because of the company. In limited liability partnerships or private limited companies, the limited liability is a very important concept where the government is trying to restrict your liability only to the amount of contribution that you have made. For example, if a partner has made a crore rupees of contribution, then his liability is restricted only up to that percentage of the money that has been invested in the company. So therefore, none of his personal assets are or can be attached until there is a specific acceptance by the promoter through any other agreement to the third parties. Private limited companies, when it comes, we talk about private limited companies because we have a different way of how the investments are handled in the private limited companies. So it is we call it share capital in private limited companies, and in LLPs we call it a contribution by the partners. Startup companies
Okay.
can plan it in private limited or LLPs or partnerships, but when it comes to certain regulations which are applicable, certain regulations are applicable for private limited companies in terms of compliances that are required to be carried on. With respect to LLPs, there are certain exceptions that are given to the limited liability partnership companies, like for example, appointment of auditors. Less than 40 lakhs of turnovers, you do not have to appoint an auditor. It's a self-regulatory kind of an organization up to a certain extent of time. But for a private limited companies, irrespective of what revenue that you make, there are certain regulations like appointment of auditors, which are mandatory for the companies to carry on. When a company is looking to raise capital through an external source, private limited company becomes more feasible because a better structuring of the finances or the investments can be made in the private limited companies, unlike the limited liability partnerships where you can only bring in additional partners and not shareholders. So these are the
Thank
major
you, sir. Thank you.
differences between private limited companies and the LLPs.
Students, is there any questions? Please unmute yourself and ask. Okay, sir, we can.
We'll continue.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So the topic, when we chose this topic to speak on, we had three different aspects in that. One is the legal challenges, one is the ethical challenges, and other one is the plan and how to startup, right? So when we are talking about three different things, now I will throw some light about the legal challenges that are there, various legal challenges which the startup companies could face doing businesses in India, right? So licensing and permit issues, right? This is nothing but when you start any company in India, there are certain regulations that you need to follow. Whether it is uh, there are things like sectoral regulations which are there, the sectors that the company is trying to operate. When I call sectors, I talk about whether it is going to be a biotechnology, whether it's going to be a food company, whether it's going to be a medicine company, or whether it's going to be any kind of a service entity. So these are the sectors, macro level, that I'm trying to trace here. Apart from that, it is also important for you to know uh, the place that you are operating. It's very important. The local laws, the zonal laws, or the state laws are also very important to take care of. When we start an entity, we know that there are certain licenses required to be done. That needs to be done, and a lot of people fail because there are certain local regulations which are there. For example, uh, if you are into a food business, there is something called food safety standards that you need to follow. If you're into an export company, then there is something called the import export code that needs to be taken. If you're in the manufacturing entity, then there are various regulations that are there for you to take licenses of fire license, legal meteorological license. All these are very important ones to be taken. GST, for example, which is applicable for all the entities. There are certain exemptions to that also. But on a macro level, this licensing and permit issues becomes very, very critical because certain entities without licenses are unethical, or it's a criminal offense. For example, food safety standards. We spoke about food company. It is easily relatable. So I would like to take an example of the food entity. FSSI license, without license, if you're operating, uh, then it is a criminal offense, which mean that the kind of penalties or infringements which that will come to you will be very high. You, in the sense, I'm talking about the startup companies in here. So the penalties can even rise up to imprisonment of the promoters or the business owners, right? So such kind of things are a primary factor of companies not able to grow because licenses are not there in place. And remember, in India, even though the government is trying to make a lot of effort in trying to simplify the process of getting the licenses, it is still very uh, time consuming and lengthier process as per our experience that we have in dealing with the licensing authorities or the businesses. So certain licenses take a very long time to come, and hence this is one of the greatest impediments for the startup companies. And business don't wait, and in case if there is a fallout, then it becomes a criminal offense. So that is where you have to be very careful about when you are trying to do a business in India. Also, uh, why we are talking about this is there are a lot of benefits that the government is also placing on the startup companies. And if there is any fallout in terms of licensing, and such benefits cannot be availed by the companies, so it becomes much more important because there is going to be grants which will not come to you. There is going to be funding from the government which will not come to you because of the licensing issues. Even raising of capital from an external or third party will become difficult. Advertisement and marketing, again, uh, I guess you all know about there are certain ethics that needs to be followed in terms of advertisements. If you're advertising, then there are certain standards that you need to follow, even with food and safety standards. There are Indian Medical Council, which puts a lot of conditions about how a medicinal product needs to be advertised and how not to be advertised. We're talking about prohibition of advertisements act. We talk about prohibition of tobacco, liquor. All these are restricted sector in terms of how you can advertise. For example, even with respect to the services, there are a lot of restrictions in terms of advertisements and what can be advertised and what cannot be advertised. So this needs to be kept into mind when the startup companies try to make the advertisements. For example, if you look at there are a lot of religious restrictions in India in terms of how it can be advertised. For example, you would have seen the recent one with Mintra's M logo, which was religiously opposed. We can talk about the Tanishq issues, which was religiously opposed. We have seen beauty cream ads, which is again now a big issue in India in terms of what to be advertised and what not to be shown as an advertisement. The fairness creams, uh, tobacco ads, liquor commercials. These are all comes with certain amount of restrictions in India. These are from a region to region, it will change, but uniformly, if you talk about the country like ours, there are a lot of restrictions in terms of religious, comparative advertisements that can be done, deceptive advertisements, which are banned in India. So I'm talking about a lot of restrictions, right? So it is like this. We are operating within a compound of regulations and requirements, and this is how certain things will be there. So a lot of companies uh, make a mistake, and remember, advertisements and marketing is an external market, right? So you are publishing yourself to the external world. So that's a lot of goodwill attached to the startup companies when when they do a mistake, it becomes a big issue. And once the goodwill is affected, it becomes difficult for them to re-establish their brand in the market. Infrastructure, again, it is at the state level, it is at the panchayat levels, right? When we have our own business, we set up offices. There is a lot of commercial spaces that are taken up. There are places which are taken up for setting up your industries, manufacturing setups. You have your own admin offices. All this comes under the state laws or the local laws that the companies are operating. For example, there was a food company which was operating, and because of lack of proper approvals, fire license, for example, there was a fire which affected their own sheds that they were operating on, and it also got spread to the nearby buildings, right? So because of lack of the licenses that the companies had, the company incurred a huge loss recently for one of our known friends, which happened, right? So infrastructure is important. You to follow all the ethical norms that are there as per the state laws or the local panchayat laws. Very important, because if there is any kind of an unforeseen activities, it would become easy for you to recover the losses. Data protection and privacy. Now it's very relevant for us to talk about this, because everything is online today. Everything is shared, and uh, very important for you to understand that the data that you are sharing is freely accessible to many people, right? We enter into, or we share information over mobile, we share information over emails, right? So there is a lot of data protection and privacy issues which are arising in the countries with the COVID. Thanks that a lot of companies are looking at the online platforms as a solution for their cost cutting. So this is very important. And legal challenges, because today non-disclosures, uh, data protection, uh, how the employees can be given access to the systems which are stringent with firewalls, all these are very important aspects. Challenges again, because it is not easy for us to completely protect ourselves, and how a startup company is able to effectively manage this will determine their rate of success. Protection of intellectual property rights very important today. Patents, trademarks, or your processes which are there today, the infringements are very high. uh, and a startup company forms basis on this innovation of a product, innovation based on a process, right? If all these are not protected, uh, and it can be easily copied and duplicated, it affects the sustainability of the company itself. So intellectual properties are very important today, and people are looking at, India is looking at doing a process patent process. India is looking at fastening the licensing of patents or the trademarks for any companies. So important challenge. How do you protect? How do you ensure that the idea is protected? Is very important for any startup company, because this is the core behind the product development itself. So a lot of companies today are entering into non-compete agreements. Non-compete agreements would mean that uh, any sharing of information or any employee who is into any kind of a research and development facility, they cannot work under a similar facility for 3 years, 5 years. Such kind of restrictions are now being placed by the businesses just to ensure that their intellectual properties are protected. Contract management, again, startup companies end up signing a lot of contracts with their employees, contracts with the suppliers, with customers, with stakeholders, with their own uh, partners, or the promoters of the company. So this contract management, if it is not properly handled, it can lead to a lot of litigations. Liabilities, startup companies cannot get away from liabilities, because we are into uh, business where we are dealing with a lot of stakeholders. So therefore liabilities cannot be avoided. But one point that we need to understand is something called a strict liability clause, which is there under the law, right? So in case we are dealing with any kind of raw materials, you're dealing with MSME segment, you're talking about handling of properties, rentals, right? So there can be a lot of things that can happen wrong with companies. For example, if there is a failure in the raw material, it will end up in the end product not being in the nature that it is has to be. For example, if you are dealing with a food company and your raw materials are not proper, the end material, end product goes into something which can cause a public litigation for the companies. So if you are not able to establish uh, the proper process into the sourcing of raw materials, which is relevant to the topic that I'm talking about on a food company, then under the strict liability, the entire liability will fall on the startup company, right? Similar ways handling of properties which are major, because we will be operating under a certain facilities, rented premises or leased premises, with respect to the insurance and with respect to the we spoke about a fire breakout in one of our friends location. The liabilities there, it can get them to a criminal liabilities also, in case if there is a loss of life and things like that. So there has to be a certain liability that you need to take into control and ensure that those liabilities are properly covered. So if the government is able to establish a strict liability clause for the startup companies, then the liability will fall on the startups. Compliances, again, a major thing we saw about a legal fallout for companies up to 8%, which is there. Compliances will vary across sectors. Compliances will vary across the the entity that you are looking at. For example, if it's a private limited company, there are a set of different types of regulations that the companies need to follow. If there is an LLP, then there is an LLP Act. If you are into finance business, then there is an RBI Act. If you are into Nidhi company, there are separate Nidhi rules. So there are certain restrictions under each of the segment that the companies will try to operate, and the compliances will vary across those type of entities, and the compliances will also vary upon the states that you are operating, right? So all these things will be a legal challenge for startup companies to follow, but without the legal proper adequate plan in this place, these challenges can become a great impediment for the startup companies to sustain. We'll come to the next one, which is the ethical challenges. Here we talk about mostly our internal and the external environment that we are operating in. For example, if you're talking about customers, then the companies can grow only if there are good customers, right? Customers which can be loyal, and that's a very, very rare scenario in India, because Indians are known for not being very loyal to a brand, right? So people change because we find discounts, and cost is a very important factor when it comes to change of customers loyalty. Retaining the customers for a long term would ensure that the company can be successful. So therefore, ensuring that the customers are happy, the customers are kept well informed, the customers deliverables are taken care, we will not be able to retain a large number of customer base. And one reason why people are now trying to invest in India is because of a large customer base, large consumer base. India is the second most populous country in the world, right? So there is a great opportunity for people to come and sell their products there, sell their services there in India. And why, even after companies incurring losses, investors are still attracted towards such few entities, is because of those customers, those companies' ability to retain their customers or to develop their customer base. For example, if you look at Swiggy, their revenue as on 2021 is 2,500 crores, right? But the amount of expenses that they've made is 6,500 crores, which means that the company is a loss of 4,000 crores. I can say this because it is in the public domain. And the companies, till now, the capital that the companies raised is around 16,000 crores. Again, in the public domain documents, which are available for you to see. Why investors are attracted towards an entity which is making loss and burning cash is the entity's ability to retain and expand their customer base. It's a very important aspect when it comes to an ethical challenge in how you are able to operate with your existing customers and increase your current customer base is important for the startup companies to grow. Employees, uh, key pillars for organizations growth. Providing the employees with a safe environment to work, uh, a method to give them adequate remuneration in terms of rewards is very important. Today, with the ESOP norms getting relaxed for private limited companies, it is easy for people to retain employees, critical employees, valuable employees for a very long time. Losing critical employees, and not providing them with an adequate reward or a proper place of work is very detrimental to the organization's further growth. Environment, everybody is looking at now ensuring that there is an environment related approach towards entity. If you come across a term called sustainable investment, people who are now across the globe trying to invest into an organization, initially it was looking at the business, uh, how the profitability is there, how the revenue is growing. Now they are also looking at how the entity is able to do a proper, uh, if they have a proper environmental footprint, right? If they are looking at any kind of carbon emissions, uh, polluting industries, today the investors are looking at avoiding such industries as an ethical step. So getting into environment uh, and the challenges that it provides, it's very important how you, the startup companies, handle it. I will tell you a very uh, my experience with Tirupur. A few years back, there was this discharge of toxins from the dyeing units, and it caused a great hindrance for the dyeing units in Tirupur because it was banned completely by the high courts of India. Post that, the entrepreneurs in Tirupur came together and they formed something called ZLD. It is called zero liquid discharge, right? And it is not widely spoken about, but Tirupur is the only city in the entire globe to have implemented this successfully. Today, if you look at, there is no liquid discharge that comes out from any of the dyeing units into the public consumption areas. Right? This is an amazing achievement by the entrepreneurs of Tirupur, and this I was reminded because we talk about environment, and they are able to overcome that challenges in the environment and create and sustain the business in a way. Right? Other one is the stakeholders. Stakeholders will mean a lot of other people, suppliers, for example, a very important person when it comes uh, to the business. Today, if you're dealing with any kind of an MSME segment, or if you're dealing with a small player, there is a lot of protection that is given for the small players, right? So if an entity is big enough, and if a purchase is happening from suppliers who are small, and the repayments need to be done on time, if it is not done on time, there are regulations today which can ensure, even after your limited liability concept, put that particular transaction into an unlimited transaction where the individual's personal property can also be attached. So taking care of the the stakeholders in the organization, the investors who are there, also a major stakeholder for the organization. All this is ethical that the companies need to do, and that will ensure that the companies can sustain to the next levels of business development. We're talking a lot about controls, restrictions, and how an entity can operate. Even after that, there is a lot of companies which are getting formed in India. The startup ecosystem is still maturing, but the length of the speed at which the startup companies are being formed in India, companies are formed in India is staggering, right? So kudos to the government for ensuring that the startup ecosystem is developed in a much better way, in much larger way, which can ensure that the entire country's unemployment problems can be resolved at a large scale. There is a lot of benefits which are given for the companies with respect to the tax holidays, with respect to tax exemptions under various laws. There are a lot of schemes or grants from the government. Right? It's a big opportunity for the startup companies. So that is the reason why there is a lot of growth in terms of the ecosystem. Well, I think we discussed about this with Dr. Kanagraj raising a point at the starting of the seminar. The structures that are available for the startup companies to take would be classified into 5 major things: proprietorship, partnership, limited liability partnership, private companies, and public limited companies. Right? Sole proprietors, it's an individual business, and the liability is unlimited. So we spoke about the benefits of startup companies, and such benefits. To avail such benefit, the startup needs to be registered under a startup portal, to be recognized by the Department of Industry and Trade and Promotions. All this is available only for partnership companies, limited liability partnership, public and private companies. Sole proprietorship is not covered under the definition. So therefore, the structure that you want to start for your company or any startups need to be considered based upon all the other factors also, like the benefits or the grants that can be possibly given. And if sole proprietorship is structure which is not recognized for under that scheme or grant, we will not be able to get that. Partnership and limited liability partnership, there are typical between 2 partners, 3 partners, or 12 partners, up to 15 partners you can go about starting your company as a partnership. The difference between the partnership and the limited liability partnership is the word liability and limitedness of that liability. Under the partnership, it is unlimited liability, traditional partnership, and under the limited liability partnership, it is under the organized sector where the liabilities is limited. So LLPs are now promoted at length and breadth because the compliances are also less in terms of LLP in compared to the private limited companies. So therefore, a lot of companies are looking at to start a structure which is in the form of limited liability partnership. The difficulty of this structure would be further rise of capital and how you can dilute your stakes uh, when you are accepting investments from a third party or the venture capital funds. And also venture capital funds or any seasoned investors are looking at private limited companies to have an exit. The exit for them becomes easy in a private limited company there, or that by a limited liability partnership. Again, public limited companies, we are talking about entities which are listed entities, right? So in listed entities, yes, there are a lot of restrictions and regulations, but as the business for the startup grows, they can look at converting their status into a limited company status. For example, if you're talking about if you're dealing with a nidhi company, then you have to be formed as a public limited company, which is public unlisted company. So there are certain companies like that which can start with only a public limited as an option. So this is a basis of the ethical legal challenges and how to start a startup company. We have restricted ourselves to the structures that the startup companies can do, and not gone into the details of the compliances of each structures like limited liability partnerships or private limited companies. So thank you everybody for patiently listening. I hope you all didn't sleep.
Not like that, sir. We are very interesting one. So I hope everyone understand about the startup. So what are the challenges and ethical challenges that in startup companies? Hope everyone should understand the things. Students, if you have any questions, please raise.
And it is important for students to raise because you are going to be the future entrepreneurs or the startups yourself, right? So important that you understand the legalities or the structures of it. So you can refer any texts, but it is important for you to understand the startup ecosystem because it's very challenging now as it is evolving in India. It is going to mature more. It is going to have many more challenges, or it's going to ease out many of the licensing issues and everything. But this ecosystem's understanding is the future for the country and the business development. So important that you raise queries and get yourself clarified. Tamil pesla. I don't mind. My Tamil is not that great, but still I can communicate. So don't hesitate.
Not only students, faculty also raise the questions.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Sheba from Michael Job College.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon.
The session was very useful and we got many information.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, நீங்க வந்து அந்த food products வந்து நம்ம if you want to opening the if you are doing a new food products அப்படின்னா we have to get the patent the FSSAI ன்னு சொன்னீங்களா சார் codes.
Amma. Yes.
What are the steps to get that code, sir? What are the steps to what are the steps we have to follow for that, sir?
Okay. With respect to the FSSAI license that you need to take, there is an agency under the state government of India where you have to get your brief about the product that you are producing. அதோட அந்த டீடைல்ஸ் எடுத்துட்டு, and there is an application that you need to fill and submit it to them. So they will come and verify in your the space where you are producing the product. They will look at the infrastructure. They will look at the product, and then they will give you license to operate. And this license will be restricted license. For example, if you're planning to operate in the state of Tamil Nadu, for example, and that's a restricted one, it's only for the state of Tamil Nadu. But if you are operating out of 2 or 3 different states, then there is a central license which is required to be taken under the FSSI. The central license is available at Chennai, Bangalore, New Delhi, right? So I think Calcutta is there. So if you are operating in multiple states, the multiple licenses needs to be taken, and central license is much more tougher to get because the authorities will do a complete audit about the product and the process that is there, and then they will issue you a central license. But if you're talking about just operating within the state, then there is a state license that needs to be taken under the FSSI. The process is you will have to approach, you will have to fill an application, and you will have to brief about the products which you are manufacturing. They will fix up a particular code under which you can sell the product. So that is how is the process.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Arvind, sir, what do you?
Yes, sir. So it is such an honor and for me to propose the vote of thanks. So on behalf of Rathinam College of Arts and Science, I would like to express my gratitude to our honorable resource person, Mr. Rathinam, managing partner RMCS LLP, to take out the time from his busy schedule to grace the evening. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our Secretary and CEO, Dr. R. Manikam, sir, for his encouragement and support. Thank you, sir. And a special thank to our beloved Principal, Dr. R. Muralidharan, sir, for providing this immense support to make this today's session a successful. Thank you, sir. And I would like to thank our IAC convener and head of biotechnology, Dr. C. Kanara, sir, for organizing this event. Thank you, sir. And I like to thank all the innovation ambassadors, IAC coordinators, mentee institutions, and participants and students for their support and their active participation. So once again, thank you everyone for making this event a great success. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for giving a wonderful session, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.